Welcome back to Starting Your Investment Journey audio series. My name is Abiodun Adelu, and my mission is to help people build successful and meaningful lives through better decisions about money, work, wealth, and personal growth. In this episode, we're going to talk about equity instruments, right? In the previous one, we learned about debt instruments. So there, you became the lender. You provided the money, and someone else used the money, but they agreed to pay you interest. But now we are moving into something that is very different. We are moving into ownership. So imagine two people give 1 million naira each to the same company. The first person lends the money, but the second person buys ownership in the company. Now, years later, let's say that the company becomes 10 times bigger. Who benefits more? Of course, the answer is usually the owner. And that is what equity is all about, right? Equity instrument is a financial instrument that represents ownership in a business. So when you buy equity or when you own an equity, you are no longer the bank. You are actually part owner of the enterprise. So you now have a stake in its success, in its growth, in its profits, and unfortunately, its failures too. So if it fails too, you also lose money, right? So here is a simple mental model that you can use to understand the difference between the two of them. So debt says that I lent you money, and equity says that I am owning part of what you're building. Now that's the difference. Do you want to lend money or you want to be part of the owners? So that's the difference. So what are shares? The most common form of equity is what we call share. Now think of a company as a big pie, right? So if that pie is divided into millions of slices, each slice represents a share, right? So buying a share means that you are buying a tiny piece of ownership. So the more of those pieces that you own, the larger your ownership stake in that company. Now, let's look at a real life example. Suppose that a company is worth 100 million naira and it divides ownership into 1 million shares. Now, what it means is that each share is now worth 100 naira. So, and each of them represents a small portion of the business. So when you buy shares, you are buying ownership in its assets, its profits, and its future growth. So you are no longer outside the business, you are inside the business. So, but if the business grows, if the value of the business grows from 100 million to, let's say, 200 million, it means that each of the shares also grow from 100 naira to 200 naira. So when you sell your share, you also gain double of the money. So how do equity investors, how do they make money? Just like I said, they make money also, but they make money in two primary ways. Number one is capital appreciation. Now this means that if the value of if the value of the ownership increases, now imagine that you buy that share at 10 naira each, and years later those shares are now trading for 50 naira each. Your ownership has become more valuable. So if you decide to sell it now, you gain times 5 of what you put into it. Number 2 is dividends, right? Dividend. So a dividend is a portion of company profits that is distributed to the shareholders. Think of it this way. A company earns money, right, at the end of the year. So management decides that part of that profit should be shared to the owners. So you receive your share based on how much of the company that you own. Of course, you need to understand that not all companies pay dividends, right? So some of them, they prefer to reinvest all their profits in order for the company to grow faster. So if you are buying a share, you should always ask, is it a dividend paying share or not? So that you will not be asking at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, where's my dividend? And they will ask you that, this company does not pay dividend. They actually, because dividend means that we are using some of the profits to pay the shareholders, and we are reinvesting the rest. Those are not paying dividend. It doesn't mean that they are not making profit. It could mean that they want to prioritize growth, so that they are reinvesting all the profits rather than sharing it to the shareholders. So your shares can grow faster, but you know that you're not going to get dividend for it. So now here is why equity can be very powerful. Now equity gives something that debt cannot: unlimited upside. The higher the business grows, the more you make from it. So when you lend money, your return is usually capped. You receive your interest and capital. That's it. No matter how profitable the business performs, you're not going to get more than the interest agreed. But with equity, there is no fixed ceiling. So if the business grows dramatically, your ownership can become dramatically more valuable too. And that's why some of the world's greatest fortunes were built through ownership, not lending, ownership. Of course, greater opportunity comes with greater uncertainty too. And those are the trade-offs, right? So if a company performs poorly, the profits may fail, the dividend may stop, and the share price may also decline in value. So always remember, owners get paid after everyone else. Employers get paid, suppliers get paid, and the lenders also get paid. Then owners receive what remains. And that is why equity generally carries more risk than debt. Now, let's look at another analogy. Now, imagine that you own a restaurant, right? Or imagine that there's a restaurant. Now, a lender says that here is the money for your business. Pay me interest. That is the lender. I don't want to be part of the owners. I just want to borrow you money. I just want to lend you money. Then you pay me back with interest after 6 months or after 1 year. So whether the restaurant succeeds spectacularly or they just survive or they lose money, it doesn't concern the lender. The lender is that I'm going to get my return. So, but the owners says that I am part of this restaurant. I want to give you money so that I become part of this restaurant. So if the restaurant expands across the country, the owner's wealth can also grow enormously. But if it struggles, then the owner also share part of the pain. So that is how it is. Now, finally, let's also reiterate the difference between shares and stocks, because sometimes people hear those two words and they say, what is the difference between shares and stocks? Of course, people use those words interchangeably, and in everyday conversation, that's usually fine to use either shares and stock. But there's just a tiny difference between the two of them. A share refers to a specific unit of ownership, while a stock generally refers to ownership in company more broadly. Now, think of it like this. So you own shares, right? And those shares are part of your stock investment. So in practice, most investors just treat those terms interchangeably. And like I said, that's perfectly fine too. So again, remember, the debts is you are putting your money into a business and you're going to get your money back with interest. But the equity person is looking at the growth of that business. So that difference is very, very important. You are not just buying a stake in a business, right? You are, if you are lending money, you are not just buying a stake in a business. You're actually lending them money and you get your money back. But if you are buying equity, you are buying a stake in a business that employs people, that they serve customers, they solve problems, and hopefully they'll create value for decades and they'll be relevant in the future. So the more relevant they are, the more you gain. So the key takeaway is that for debt, you are a lender, but for equity, you are part of the owner. So now that you've understood that, we're going to move into the third category that confuses many beginners, like I said, right? So a category that is not easily understandable, right? And it's not about lending or ownership. It's about managing uncertainty. And that's what we're going to look at in the next episode. So thank you for listening. Again, always remember, learn before you invest, build before you buy, and always think long term. Thank you for listening.